It happens mid-assault. You're a Russian drone operator in a freezing tree line outside Donetsk, palms numb inside thin gloves, eyes locked on a tablet. Your FPV's crosshair is drifting toward a Ukrainian command post. The telemetry is clean, the uplink is solid, and then the picture tears. A grey smear, a frozen frame. Your headset goes quiet. You blink, curse, tap the screen. Still nothing. The unit commander is shouting for status on the net, but the net is gone. Down the trench, another team barks that their quad just fell out of the sky. The platoon's map app won't refresh. The artillery spotters can't pass a grid, and the assault clock is ticking. 5 seconds, 10, 15, and in that dead air, it hits you. Someone, somewhere, just flipped a switch. Starlink, the lifeline you weren't supposed to have. The thing that made your cheap drones powerful and your cheap radios irrelevant, just went black, across sector after sector. A foreign tech billionaire just blinded and deafened parts of a Russian army in a war that Russia started. And the worst part? You can't even shoot back at a satellite. For months, Russia had exploited, scavenged, and flat-out stolen Starlink access. Black market terminals, captured kits, spoofed accounts routed through third countries, even jury-rigged dishes bolted to vehicles and, insanely, to attack drones. Ukrainian intelligence flagged it as far back as early 2024, naming units in occupied areas and calling the misuse systemic. SpaceX denied any sales to Russia. That's true. But Russia didn't need a receipt to plug in a stolen terminal. The network worked where the satellites allowed it, and for too long that included occupied Ukrainian ground. So what suddenly went wrong for Russia? Here's the quiet, devastating reveal. In late January and early February, Ukraine and SpaceX moved from whack-a-mole to a whitelist. Only verified Ukrainian terminals, devices tied to approved accounts, verified users, and known unit inventories would be allowed to handshake with the constellation over Ukraine. Everyone else cut off. Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov announced the change and said the whitelist was being populated. Minutes later came reports that Russian terminals already linked to grey markets and battlefield drones had been blocked. Elon Musk said the countermeasures seemed to have worked. For Russian units that had built their tempo around stolen connectivity, it was a nightmare, hit at the speed of software. Imagine the moment from the ground. You're in an assault group, rehearsed to the second. The first quad is a decoy, the second is your eyes, the third is the hammer, an FPV with a shaped charge cued by a forward observer over a Starlink chat. The feed dies mid-run. Your spotter can't upload the last grid. The battery ticks down while you stare at a frozen frame, and the Ukrainians start to move. Your section leader gestures the old way, hands, shouting, confusion. This is what cutting Starlink off actually means in the dirt. Drones forced to fly blind, artillery blind, squads blind. All while Ukrainian teams still talk, still pass targets, still hunt. The scale matters. Ukrainian officials and reporting describe thousands of unauthorized Russian terminals that had crept into the theater, enough to wire up assault companies, artillery observers, and drone workshops across multiple sectors. Then, silence. Reuters quotes 3 Ukrainian sources saying the disruption appeared to be significant, with some Russian assaults halted outright after units lost their digital glue. Ukrainians kept operating because their terminals were on the whitelist. Russia was not. It's a single policy change, but it hits like a kinetic strike. And the mystery deepens. How do you kill a connection without taking down your own? Technically, there are a few levers, none cinematic, all brutal. Geofencing was the first gatekeeper. It's the simplest. The satellite network refuses to close the link for devices in certain coordinates or with certain movement patterns. That's baseline. The whitelist is harsher. Think of it as an allow list of terminal IDs, account credentials, and device telemetry. Everything else gets a fast no at the network edge. There are newer wrinkles too, reported by Ukrainian users and OSINT analysts. Movement speed caps that choke terminals riding on UAVs at highway speeds, forcing drone-carried dishes to lose link mid-mission. One Russian-language flood of complaints claimed terminals died above 75 to 90 kilometers per hour. Ukrainians told their troops, register or lose the net. Whether every anecdote is perfect or not, the pattern is unmistakable. Ukraine and SpaceX tightened the screws, and Russian feeds started to blink out. The battlefield effects stack fast. Russian FPV shops that relied on Starlink as a backhaul for longer range guidance lose range and precision. Recon teams can't stream full motion video to guns the next valley over. Artillery spotters pushing fire missions over chat are back to voice and latency. Company commanders who built SOPs around map apps and live drone overwatch watch their tempo collapse. In some sectors, according to Ukrainian sources, assaults got called off mid-push because coordination disintegrated. In others, Russian operators tried to swap to domestic terminals on the fly, RS-30M and similar, only to find bandwidth thin and latency cruel at the exact moment they needed low-lag video. Russian mill bloggers and Z channels howled. Some called it the end for units that had built their entire tactical routine on borrowed Starlink. Listen to the noise from the other side. Pro-war Telegram accounts talk about a massive failure of Starlink, used in the grey zone by Russian troops, with bloggers split between fury at Musk and shrugs that they'll adapt. Medusa, which tracks those channels, flagged similar mass complaints in earlier waves. This time, the outage doesn't look like a global hiccup. It looks targeted, lasting, and Russian-specific. The whitelisted Ukrainian net stayed up. The Russian shadow net went dark. Officials in Kyiv didn't gloat, but they did underline the stakes. The Defense Ministry told commanders to verify every terminal immediately. Fedorov said plainly, whitelisted Starlinks work. Russian terminals are blocked. It's a rare sentence that can stop an assault. This one did. And here's the part that should keep Russian planners up at night. This didn't require a brigade of HIMARS or a month-long seed campaign. It took code, coordination, and a list. Ukraine pressed the case. SpaceX executed. And a whole slice of Russian battlefield digitization evaporated. That's not a feel-good slogan. That's a new kind of fire. Ukraine has used drones to make kill zones before. Near Kupiansk, a robot army whittled assaults down to nothing. Now, Kyiv is building a different wall, a network kill zone that stops attacks at the login screen. If you've watched this channel, you've heard 80% before, the figure Kyiv used for the share of Russian targets destroyed by Ukrainian drones. The reason that number mattered wasn't just the kills, it was the data, the networked speed at which Ukrainian units saw, decided, and struck. The whitelist preserves that Ukrainian network while taking a sledgehammer to Russia's illegal clone of it. It's the same theme, now applied to the backbone instead of the munition. Let's break down what Russia just lost. First, eyes. FPV runs aren't magic, they're arithmetic. Battery life, latency, and a clean link. Russian workshops had started bolting terminals to vehicles and buildings to extend their operating bubbles. With the link gone, those bubbles shrink. Operators are forced to rely on analog video with a shorter leash and higher jamming vulnerability, or on domestic SATCOM with geostationary style latency that turns a tight FPV dive into a drunk-reviewed Russia's Starlink killer. Prototypes mocked the tech as 1990s era in responsiveness. That matters when you're trying to thread a window at 120 kilometers per hour. Second, timing. Artillery spotting is a race against enemy displacement. Starlink gave Russian spotters the ability to push a video clip and grid in seconds to a gun you couldn't even hear. Now, you're back to radios with congestion or fat-fingered texts writing unreliable backhauls. SECO and the target moves. That's how you go from walk-rounds onto the trench to we lost them. Third, command. A company whose comms tree lived on a stolen constellation is now stuck with whatever the terrain and old gear allow. Orders lag, check-ins fail. Picture those platoon leaders banging on cold tablets that just say no service, while the unit that's still whitelisted and still talking shifts fire on them. It's a lopsided fight before the first shot. How did the blackout get this far? Because Ukraine didn't just complain, it built the mechanism. Fedorov announced a formal government resolution and a verification procedure in cooperation with SpaceX. The ministry told every commander to register devices. Western outlets reported the same arc. whitelist incoming, Russian drone terminals specifically targeted, Musk saying the steps worked. Bloomberg had previously noted that Pentagon officials were also working with SpaceX to blunt unauthorized Russian use. Connect the dots, and you get a coalition operation. Ukraine leading and auditing, SpaceX executing on the network edge, allied defense officials smoothing sanctions, export control, and legal seams. A policy kill chain. What about Russia's adaptations? They'll try them all. Domestic RS-30M terminals? On paper, they can push two-way data in motion. In practice, they lack the mesh density, bandwidth, and low latency that made Starlink lethal at the tactical edge. China or Iran? Maybe Russia looks to Chinese non-geostationary startups or Iranian networks for stopgaps. But the equivalents are years behind in density and integration, and the politics are messy. Even Russian programs to field Starlink analogs at exercises showed off gear that looked more like parade props than field-hardened kit. Meanwhile, Russia's own Sfera/Express RV constellation timelines have slipped, and no one on a trench line has time for slide decks. Electronic warfare? Russia already floods the airwaves with jammers. But here's the rub. EW could jam Starlink at the tactical edge only in small bubbles and at large power cost. It was never a cheap theater-wide off-switch. The whitelist was. It's the paradox of modern war. Sometimes the cleanest strike is a login refusal. Let's go back to the line for a moment. Step into those boots again. The battalion needed a 20-minute push across a frozen field, coordinated by a precision swarm that turns trenches into targets and machine gunners into last-gen problems. Instead, your swarm dissolves. Without live feeds, you can't steer, can't confirm, can't shift. Your battery bleeds into the snow. The attack clock expires, and you're still staring at a spinning icon. Somewhere above you, 10,000 little satellites streak across the sky with a simple instruction written in their network tables. This terminal is not allowed. It's not just the drones. Think about every digital routine Russian units quietly stole. Night moves synced via group chat. Engineers are sending bridge photos to batteries. Medics are pushing live pins to casualty collection points. Pilots glancing at a ground team's file upload before a toss bomb. Take the link away, and each of those becomes a maybe. Warfare is already a chaos machine. Starlink, when used legally, brings order to one side's chaos. When it's stripped away from the other, they don't just lose a tool, they lose time. Ukraine's reaction to the blackout. Relief. Then, exploitation. Units reported no problems on their side as Russian channels spun up with outage complaints. One Ukrainian serviceman quipped that Russians sawed off the branch they sat on when they started wiring Starlink onto strike drones. That's the thing about grey zone theft. It works until it doesn't, and when the hammer drops, it's not a skirmish, it's a cascade. The pattern lines up with what we've seen since the start. A Ukrainian digital army that treats code and comms like artillery, range, rate of fire, and reliability. In earlier episodes, we showed how massed drones created kill zones that pinned Russian manpower, and how a data-driven drone corps could push toward an 80% share of Russian targets hit. The whitelist is the comms complement to that strategy. Deny your enemy the network they didn't earn, and your drones remain the only ones with clean eyes. Where does this go next? For Russia, sustaining offensive operations just got harder. Offensive action needs tempo, stacked micro-timings that depend on coordination. Every second of latency or every dropped packet compounds. If the whitelist policy holds, and if SpaceX continues to treat any Russian-linked terminal inside Ukrainian borders as a no-go, the offensive will bleed time at the seams. Russia will lean heavier on legacy comms and line-of-sight control for drones. That caps range, reduces precision, and forces more men into more dangerous places just to keep attacks stitched together. Attrition accelerates when the network dies. For Ukraine, the tech edge widens because it's not just about keeping Starlink. Anyone can buy hardware. It's about building rules, lists, and workflows that preserve your net and delete the enemy's. Kyiv learned hard lessons in 2022 and 2023 about over-relying on a private network. Since then, you can see the scaffolding. Diversify providers where possible, pressure partners to lock down misuse, and build legal, technical, and diplomatic levers that can be pulled fast. When Musk said the steps seemed effective, that wasn't victory dancing. It was proof that Ukraine had built the relationships to make those steps happen in days, not months. For every other military watching this war, this is the warning shot. Commercial satellite internet is no longer a nice-to-have in war. It's a weapon class. It can be whitelisted and geofenced. It can be denied to an invader while kept alive for a defender. And it can change the outcome of an assault without a single explosion, simply by deciding who gets to talk. If you are building a modern force and your plan for SATCOM is buy terminals on the open market, you don't have a plan. You have a dependency someone else can revoke. We should also be honest about friction. Global outages happen. One hit the front in 2025. Ukraine is racing to develop alternative SATCOM paths and to make sure a single constellation's bad day doesn't trigger a bad week at the front. Europe is inching toward IRIS-2. Multi-orbit terminals are maturing. Defense planners are finally writing rules for how private networks fight alongside national ones. But in Ukraine, in February 2026, the decisive story is simpler. The side that built legitimacy won the network. The side that stole it lost the link. Zoom out. A lot of people think war is about steel, tanks, shells, jets. It is, but it's also about the unseen grid that makes steel smart. Russia built kill chains on a network it didn't own, and for a year, that theft paid dividends. Better drone coordination, faster fires, quicker assault cycles. Then a list dropped, and the dividends stopped. This wasn't just a PR blow, it was a battlefield one. Ask any operator who watched a feed die in the last 72 hours. They'll tell you, when the picture tears and the audio is gone, you don't just lose a drone, you lose the plan. If you're Moscow, that's terrifying. A man you can't sanction and a company you can't shell just deleted pieces of your fight. If you're Kyiv, it's the payoff for a years-long push to turn a civilian network into a military backbone and to harden it against abuse. And if you're the rest of us, watching the first true network war unfold, here's the lesson to file away for the next crisis. The most decisive weapon on the battlefield might not be the missile you see, it might be the connection you don't. If you want the next deep dive into how this digital kill chain is evolving, how whitelists, geofences, and yes, drones are remaking modern war, stick around. We'll keep cutting through the noise and putting the right numbers, quotes, and battlefield reality on your screen.